Welcome to this Techerati interview series ahead of Tech Show London on the 8th and 9th of March at Excel London. I'm Stuart Crowley, Closer Still Media's Global Content Manager and Editor at Techerati. Today, my guest is Dr. Laura Gilbert. She's the Chief Analyst at 10 Downing Street, and Laura will be in conversation at Tech Show London regarding the power of digital transformation and fostering innovative cultures. But today we're going to have a trip down memory lane to talk about 3 significant years in Laura's life that has led to her career at 10 Downing Street and what that's led to her becoming a keynote speaker at Tech Show London. So welcome to the interview series, Laura.
Thank you very much.
So let's take a trip down memory lane. And what would be your first significant year and why did you choose that?
I chose 2003 because it was my first international kickboxing competition. I was competing at the European Championships for Savate Kickboxing.
What were some of the reactions that you receive when people find out that you're an international kickboxing champion?
I think they're usually reasonably surprised, and then they're a lot nicer to me.
Possibly a bit scared. So how did you get into kickboxing?
It's sort of in line with most of the things I get into on a whim. I was living in a student house in my second year where for various reasons, I didn't feel terribly safe. And I didn't really have many options to sort of do anything about it. And I remember waking up at 2 a.m. and with the genius idea that obviously the solution was to start kickboxing. So I immediately texted my best friend and said, we're going kickboxing. We sort of went to this local university class and stood at the back and giggled a lot and fell over and were generally just awful. After a few weeks, I think she decided it wasn't really for her. I wasn't sure I wanted to carry on my own, and it drifted until I was in my 4th year when, of course, a lot of people had gone on to do their lives and I was still doing a master's. And I thought, no, I'm going to go on my own and I'm going to have a bash at this. And again, I was just terrible. I didn't do sports at school unless people made me. The most I'd have done in years was run for a bus or run for the 9 a.m. lecture and sliding 2 minutes late. So I was awful. Every time someone punched me in the face, I cried. I found it really, really difficult. But I remember thinking to myself, I only ever do things I'm good at. I do maths, I was good at music. I didn't do languages, which I was terrible at. And I thought I'm going to pick one thing that I'm just bad at. And I'm going to commit enough to be good at that. So I did, basically. I persevered and I trained really hard and over time just sort of got good at it, really. Grim determination.
Are there any things that you've learned from your time doing kickboxing that you apply to your current career and past career choices? A
lot, but probably the most important thing for me is actually about the way I'm motivated. So I'm quite bloody-minded. If I set my mind to something, I'm going to try and achieve it. And that gets me a long way in terms of, if when I was weightlifting or, trying to get decent at kickboxing, the kind of degree of perseverance, I can put myself through a lot to achieve something I want to get to. But when it comes to perhaps more the areas where you might be landing something that's more of a victory externally, I really struggled with that. So what I find with the kickboxing is I train and I'd work and I'd get good and I'd train with friends, colleagues, I'd enter tournaments, but it would get to the Europeans and the World Championships and it's really hard. And for me, the victory over myself was getting in the ring in the first place. And there'd be a little part of my brain that went, well, if you win this fight, you're going to have to come back tomorrow and enter the semi-finals. More people will hit me. It's going to continue to hurt. Or if you lose, you can go to the bar, have a glass of wine, eat anything you want. Because I'd been cutting weight for quite some time at that point. And that little part of my brain, when the time came, meant that I didn't step over, commit and try to win. And it wasn't really until I started teaching students and they'd come and watch. And your students need an instructor that they look up to, that they think is good. They think they're learning from someone, that knows what they're doing. And when I had students there and I felt that I couldn't let them down, that voice went away or was balanced out by they're watching me, they're relying on me, they want me to perform for our club. And I pushed over the edge. So I think it's taught me a lot about sort of what motivates me. I have no problem. I work very hard. And I have no problem pushing through things. But when it comes to landing a victory, I need something external that matters to me, that means it's important. And if I don't land this thing, if I don't make it succeed, if I don't step over the edge, then I will be letting down something that's not just me. And I think that's probably the most important thing that I figured out, is how I work in that space.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, a level of responsibility, but to be aware that that is something that motivates you and drives you is very introspective, I guess. So out of interest, what are the sort of things that in your career might be an external factor for you?
In the current job, and in fact in Rescon, when I was doing medical technologies, there is a genuine sense that people's well-being, at least, is very dependent on what you do, and crucially what you don't do, which I think is a lot of, there's a lot of pressure that's involved in that. But if I don't do my best every day to deliver better outcomes, if I don't make sure that there's evidence available, that, we have systems in place to try and provoke the best decisions to be made. And of course, it's not my job to make the decisions in the most part. If I don't try hard enough to do that, then there will be real life impacts on people in the country. So that's, there's a lot in that, but it does keep me going.
Let's move ahead to closer towards Tech Show London in 2023. So what would be your next significant year?
I've chosen 2007 for this, which was a year I was dating my now husband. And I had I was living in student accommodation quite illegally with a couple of meerkats. And I had this beat up Polo, and I wanted to change from a tape to a CD player in the car. And I said to my husband, I'm going to use some of my hard-earned lecturing money, and I'm going to go out and get this CD player fitted in my car, treat myself. And he said, why would you pay someone to do that? You could just do it yourself. And it was honestly mind-blowing. I was very doubtful. I came from a family where you pay people to do things, plumbing, painting, that sort of thing. So I knew how to change a tire and bump start a car, but that was about it. And I was very skeptical. And he went on eBay, and he got a CD player for a car for £15. And he pulled up a YouTube video, which, is very ubiquitous now, but it wasn't so much then. And he took the tape deck out and he put this CD player in. And I can't tell you how much it's changed my life. It had never occurred to me. It did not occur to me that that's the kind of thing you could just go and do. And if it had, I would have thought that I personally couldn't do it. As that kind of, the way it's sort of translated in my life would be difficult, I think, to underestimate. So years later, when he decided to start Rescon, and, we had massive student loans, and I wasn't sure it was a good idea at all. I thought a well-paying job would be the way to go. And I'd gone into quantitative finance, and he had about £10,000, and that was it. And he gave it to this app development company, and to develop his great idea, which then became Linkus, which was our big product. And they handed him back 10 grand later an app that wouldn't turn on an Android phone. And he was obviously upset about that. It's stressful. And I said, if they can build an Android app, I can build an Android app. But whip out YouTube, let's see how you do this thing. And sort of went from, quantitative finance is technically interesting but not wildly motivating, to sort of, I was, on the side building up all this tech for Rescon, and then ended up transitioning to do that full time back to the student salary. But the idea that you could just, if other people can do it, then you can do it yourself, has just followed me throughout my life ever since, and I think really changed me in quite significant ways. So
I guess, did that realization change the way that you see or approach technology as well, that might relate to your current position?
It sort of indirectly led to quite a hacker mentality. So there's never really been a technical problem I haven't been able to solve. And if the technology doesn't exist to do something, you can build it yourself. You can almost always find a way around anything. And if there's not a direct route, then maybe you go in with a piece of kit, or you find someone who can wire something up for you. And I don't really believe in a tech problem I can't solve.
So do you quite like being hands-on with technology then, when it comes to dealing with technology? And does this apply to how potentially you lead a team or approach a problem in your current role? Are you quite hands-on?
Yes, this role's been very interesting. I've always been, as an academic researcher, you do your own research. With Rescon, I was leading the team that building things very much myself. When I came here, I asked the nascent team, I think about 4 people, the data science team, for access to the GitHub, and was met with absolute horror. You don't get directors coming in and messing around with your code. They weren't comfortable with it. They didn't like the idea. And it's sort of understandable, but the way the civil service works traditionally, and I hope that this is changing, is that they sort of divide people into managerial and the people that do the work. And when I applied for this job, and when I was given it, the person that interviewed me sort of said, "Well, we hired you for 2 reasons. One was obviously you know what you're doing, but also we thought you could manage any team. You're a manager." And that's absolutely untrue. I can manage data scientists, technologists. Put me in charge of the policy team, I'd be absolutely dead in the water. And I also don't think that way of thinking is the best way to do things. I think, particularly in the tech space, if you don't have a decent understanding of the technology you're working in, you get really picked off, particularly by external suppliers. You can give people very, very bad advice, particularly when people are quoting how long it takes to do something and how much it costs. Having a genuine understanding of how you would build it yourself is absolutely crucial. And I think also it shows people, there's really talented people who are following in our footsteps with, greater and more expansive technology skills in AI and, robotics and all this sort of thing. They have to see a career pathway that looks worth doing. Most of those people don't want to be managers. They want to see somebody that's at least somewhat technical, but that's still, doing some of that work and moving up. And my team doesn't do a lot of JavaScript. Last year I built it's a piece of very interactive D3 JavaScript, and a lot of them were quite surprised I could do that, and I was just thrilled to prove my actual credentials. Makes a difference. I've had a lot of feedback on it, but we need people with that expertise at higher levels, in order to, if nothing else, make the civil service sort of robust against poor spending decisions. So yeah, I'm a big fan of hands-on, and I think it's been, if anything, hard to learn how to let go of that.
Yeah. What is your final significant year that you've chosen?
That was 2011, the start of Rescon. As I mentioned, I was sort of building bits of tech on the side, websites and Android and iOS apps, that kind of thing, and doing a little bit of research. And I was very impressed by the way that my now husband was running this company. Again, it hadn't occurred to me that you could go and just start a company, and that's the thing that real people do. And so I was sort of in a supportive role, but still very firmly had my feet in a paying job. Watching him do it made it feel more real. And when it got to 2012, I was working for this high frequency trading group, and I was actually in hospital after an operation when they sent me a text saying company closed, everyone redundant. And I had to decide what to do next. And I was pretty much weighing up a $500,000 sort of level salary versus jacking the whole thing in and going and joining this startup as the second person on it. And I went for the second option. So that took me out of sort of generic, almost like the worker drone space, where you've got very prescribed jobs, and into something where you're building not just the products but a company yourself from the ground up. And yeah, it was amazing. Without having done that, I would never have even dreamt of applying for this job, I think. And I don't think I'd have realized how capable I was, probably.
With Rescon kind of being your baby in 2011 and growing that, what sort of challenges did you face as the CTO of Rescon, and what sort of ways did you overcome those challenges?
I mean, it was very, very challenging. I tended to try and focus mainly on the tech side, and we did quite a lot of scientific research, sort of funded scientific research as well. So I really enjoyed that part of it. But it's everything from hiring the right team through to paying that team. You know, you need to be bringing in 50 grand free and clear to pay a small engineering team every month. And you know, if you let the side down by not producing what the salespeople need, or if it's just, you know, things happen. And that doesn't happen when it's your company, and you know, I owned half of it. You're looking at taking out personal loans to pay people, so the level of stress was very, very high. And the challenges on the tech side, particularly, I mean, medical tech is, I think, particularly challenging. We were doing very early personal health records, trying to integrate with NHS data, which of course a lot of people know is quite a difficult thing to do. You know, the sheer amounts of paperwork and due diligence and sort of security testing. I had to be able to, you know, we had a small team, I had to be able to do all the sysadmin, all of the Linux servers, through to, you know, passing all of the various security credentials you need. So it was very hard work. It always felt very much like one wrong foot and we could be in pretty serious legal trouble. You know, that's very stressful. But at the same time, the freedom of deciding what you're doing for yourself and growing something. And we never really did, you know, it didn't go badly wrong in that sense. Yeah. So, yeah, it was very challenging, but definitely worth doing. Possibly both halves of a partnership, both doing that, you know, was more stressful than if it was just one of us.
The fact that nothing major went wrong, I think, shows your skills and ability to be able to achieve that. Interestingly, you worked with your partner to make this happen. What sort of how did you maintain a personal relationship and a professional relationship? Because I'm sure this happens more often than we think, that people go into business together sometimes. And so how did you manage that personal and professional life?
It was very challenging. We're both highly driven and we both cared about it a lot. But when we discussed work or advocating for our roles or our teams, it was kept very sort of separate. And, you know, we used specific strategies. So, for example, you know, he was, you know, running the company and bringing in the business, and would tend to come in with demands about the sort of things that we would build. And we got ourselves in a position where on the engineering side, we were really over delivering. So we'd be asked really unreasonable things, and then people would kill themselves and it would happen. So that's when I first started using kind of agile methodology, and we'd do sprint cards, and they're on a board in the living room. And when you'd come in and go, oh, I need this by next week, I'd say, there's the sprint board, what are we not going to do so we can make that happen? So a little bit of process went into that. I think, you know, we were always very much on the same side, so it wasn't completely stress-free. But we did feel we were building something together, and actually, if anything, it was, you know, more of a positive for the relationship than a negative, I think. I can't recommend it for everyone, you know.
Certainly not, but you know, what didn't kill you made you stronger, I think, in many ways. Were there any other, with the stress that you mentioned, were there any other lessons of sort of personal growth or self-discovery that you learned from that time at Rescon and that you now apply to your time at 10 Downing Street?
I mean, a lot of it's about the perseverance. I got a lot better at handling stress and kind of trying to compartmentalize it a little bit. I also developed a pretty serious working all night habit, which hasn't left me and probably isn't, you know, I can't recommend. It's good for your well-being, but a lot of resilience came out of that, I think. I really felt a lot of pride in my work, and it's left me with a sense that I wouldn't do a job I didn't feel proud of now. Like the value of really being invested in your work and being proud of it and wanting to talk about it to people. I think that's really easy to underestimate. You need to make a choice, you know, living to work, working to live. And if you're doing a bit of the living to work, and you shouldn't do all of that, you really do want to feel good about it. So, you know, there's that. And it also I tell you what, it taught me to handle sexism as well. There's a huge downside, you know, as a female technologist, you encounter a lot when you're married to the other half of the business relationship, and the CEO in that case. I had these hugely frustrating engagements where, you know, one person in particular would always introduce me as Tom's wife, and I'd be saying, actually, I use my married name, Dr. Laura Gilbert. I'm the CTO of this company. And he flatly refused to address me as anything other than Tom's wife. And, used to put conference badges with my married name on it. And, finally shutting that down felt great, and has left me with much less tolerance for that sort of thing. I'm much more prepared and I think better at slightly gracefully calling out that sort of behavior, because the implication was that that's why I got the job, and rather than I was co-building this company, in fact doing the tech side of it. So yes, a lower tolerance for nonsense.
And rightfully so. And that leads me on nicely to my question on, between 2011 and present day, what changes, what are the biggest changes that you feel work cultures, societal kind of approaches to technology in the technology sector? What changes have you really experienced? And how do you make sure that you and your team are kind of staying relevant, I guess, to the world, to the culture, and personally for yourself as well? As you mentioned, the sexism, has that improved? What sort of culture changes have there been?
I mean, interesting questions. Tech culture, I think it's really been a paradigm shift. I think it's a lot harder to be current than it used to be, because there's so much technology, currently we're all chasing AI, aren't we? That, the pathway through sort of edge computing, which I was doing quite a lot of a while, wearable sensors, etc. I couldn't tell you what's going on in the wearable sensors industry anymore, because, I'm doing this kind of hopefully fairly cutting edge data science and kind of machine learning and a bit of AI, etc. You drop the ball for 6 months, and I think this is a problem for women, particularly with maternity leave. It's changed so much. A woman who takes a year off work, it's not just the well-known impacts on your sort of earning potential, etc., and your sort of career progression options. If you're in a tech field, I would imagine in HR, the actual space maybe doesn't move on so much. In a tech field, what you're walking back into after you've, gone and had a child, or you're taking a work break of any sort, very, very difficult to catch up. And it's very difficult to even have a full-time job with meetings and obligations and kind of keep abreast of the technology. I think, my team is staffed by people who are genuinely very enthusiastic / obsessional about this sort of tech space. I think unless you are, really kind of obsessed, staying current is very hard. Doubtless there will be improvements even to the way we digest information. You sort of look at this ChatGPT and the way it produces summaries. We can probably even come up with tech solutions to how we stay a bit more current. But you do need to pick a field, and the field you need to pick is getting narrower and narrower, just because of the breadth of the entire market. Yeah. So and culturally, I think, there's a lot more interest in tech. We have a long way to go, in my view, in, again, taking the tech space from people that do work into people who are leaders. That's still, in government and other places, the people that run companies are very rarely sort of technology, experts. And I think there's a lot to be said in including more analytical, more developer, more engineering brains in the running of companies and organizations. Breaking down the groupthink and bringing a different way of looking at things, I think, is very valuable. So we've still got quite a way to go. Hopefully sexism is steadily decreasing. I think ageism is probably our biggest next challenge in some ways, because it's seen as a young person's game still.
That's really interesting. I know we don't have enough time to really dig into the detail of that, and but the exciting thing is that you will be at Tech Show London to really talk about fostering these innovative cultures, and so I'm really excited to actually come along to that after hearing your experiences as well. Really exciting stuff. So I guess my final question is why do you feel it should be important for business leaders, for tech enthusiasts to come along to Tech Show London and come to your session on fostering those innovative cultures, being aware of the challenges for groups that might not have the right representation? Why do you feel like it's important for people to come to your session?
I mean, in terms of groups having the right representation, there's a lot of data and statistics on diverse boards and the massively increased success of those sorts of companies in the global marketplace, about changing the way we view work in order to support more types of people to engage really meaningfully in the economy. It's good for companies, it's good for the economy at large, it's good for the future of our children, really. I do think there's a lot to be said for the community pulling together more, and I've got a huge vested interest. I really want to change the way that people engage with government. I'm really hoping that people will come along, sort of see the kind of things we're doing, and maybe not decide to move into the civil service, but come and join us for a few years. Bring in your cutting-edge skills. We need to get more people who have the ability to deliver public services in a much more efficient, automated, and engaging sort of way. And this is the marketplace where people have those skills, and we really need to draw them in and try and encourage them to use some of those skills to help the public at large, I think. So I've got a very personal investment. I'm hoping that people will come and just think a little bit about their careers and whether or not they want to spend some time in government, and we can give them unique opportunities. So I think it's very important for the industry as a whole to be really clear on the kind of the direction of British industry and technology. One example, I'm deviating slightly, but in 2016 we were the #1 e-government in the world. I think we're either 12th or 16th now. I must look that up. But these kind of people can get us back to #1, and that means great public services in a better country to live in. So going to try and lure them all in.
Yeah, well, that's a great reason for people to come along. Well, thank you, Laura. And obviously people can hear a lot more from you at Tech Show London this March. So yeah, I think that people should definitely register their free ticket and get involved in this conversation. So hopefully, well, I'll see you and hopefully every viewer that watches this interview at Tech Show London very soon. So thank you so much, Laura, for joining us today.
Thank you very much indeed.